Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're cracking open the complex but really powerful world of Kantian ethics. It's a system of morality that isn't built on the consequences of our actions, but on something completely different, the unshakable foundation of reason and duty.
All right, let's just dive right in with a classic, high-stakes moral dilemma. A murderer's at your door. They're looking for your friend, who's hiding inside. They ask you, is your friend here? Now, your gut probably screams, of course I lie to save my friend, right? But what if that instinct is wrong? What if the morality of your action has absolutely nothing to do with the outcome?
You know, this single, terrifying question really sets the stage for our entire investigation. It's a scenario that's specifically designed to push ethical systems to their breaking point. And it's the perfect way to get inside the head of a philosopher who had a very controversial answer to this question.
So normally, we'd weigh the options, wouldn't we? Lying means my friend is safe, telling the truth leads to their death. Simple. This focus on results, on the outcome, is called consequentialism. But today, we're going to meet a philosopher who argued that looking at outcomes is entirely the wrong way to think about morality.
So let's introduce our moral detective, the 18th century philosopher Immanuel Kant. He believed the key to morality wasn't in the result of an action at all, but in the reason for the action itself. For Kant, it's all about your intention. That's where the moral magic happens. For Kant, think about qualities we usually admire, like intelligence or courage or even happiness. He'd say those things aren't good in and of themselves. I mean, a villain can be incredibly intelligent and courageous, right? Kant argued that only one thing is purely, unconditionally good, with no ifs, ands, or buts, a good will.
And this is a really crucial distinction he makes. Imagine a shopkeeper who always gives the correct change. He might do it because, hey, it's good for business, brings back customers. That's acting in accordance with duty. But a shopkeeper who gives correct change simply because it is the right thing to do, whether it helps his business or not, that is acting from duty. And for Kant, only that second action has any real moral worth. The motive is everything.
Okay, so how do we know what our duty is? We can't just rely on our feelings or look at the outcomes. Kant, who is all about reason, gives us this powerful logical tool to figure it out. So he started by distinguishing between two types of commands, or what he called imperatives. First, you have hypothetical imperatives. They're conditional. If you want to pass your exam, then you must study. But moral commands, Kant argued, are totally different. They are categorical. They're unconditional. They apply to everyone, everywhere. They don't say, don't lie if you want people to trust you. They just say, do not lie, period.
And here it is. This is the core test of Kantian ethics. Now, a maxim is just a fancy word for your personal rule for acting, basically what you're doing and why you're doing it. And the test asks a really profound question. Could you rationally want the rule you're about to act on to be a universal law that everyone, everywhere, always follows?
Kant actually broke this down into a really clear procedure. First, figure out what your rule, your maxim is. Second, universalize it. Imagine a world where everybody lives by this rule. And third, check for a contradiction. If you find one, the action is morally forbidden. Simple as that.
All right, enough theory. Let's actually run a couple of classic scenarios through this test to see how it works in practice. This is where the rubber really meets the road.
So imagine you're desperate for cash. You think about lying to get a loan that you know you have no way of repaying. Your personal rule, your maxim, would be something like, when I need money, I will make a false promise to get it. Okay, now let's universalize it.
What happens in a world where everyone makes false promises whenever they need money? Well, the whole concept of a promise becomes totally meaningless, right? No one would believe any promise, so you couldn't even make one to get your loan in the first place. Your own maxim destroys itself. Kant calls this a contradiction in conception.
Okay, let's try another one. What if your personal rule is to be completely self-sufficient and just never help anyone else, no matter how much they're suffering? You're just going to focus on yourself. Let's run this one through the test.
Now, you can conceive of a world where nobody helps each other. It's a cold world, sure, but it's not logically impossible like the promising world was. But, and this is the key, Kant asks, could you rationally will to live in it? He says no, because you are a rational being, and you know that at some point in your life you will inevitably need help from others. To will a world where no help exists would be to will against your own future self. He calls this a contradiction in willing.
And this table just brilliantly illustrates the results.
The false promise fails because it's not even conceivable as a universal law. Not helping others fails because, while you can imagine it, you can't rationally will it. So in both cases, the action is morally impermissible, according to Kant.
But, there's actually a deeper reason why these maxims fail, beyond just the logical contradictions. Kant explains this with a second, and maybe more intuitive version of his big idea.
This powerful formulation really gets to the heart of it. It says that every rational being, every person, has intrinsic worth and dignity. We are ends in ourselves, not just tools or objects to be used for someone else's purposes. Think about it. When you make that false promise, you are using the other person. You're treating them merely as a means to get your money, completely disrespecting their ability to make a rational, informed choice for themselves. You've robbed them of their autonomy. And that, for Kant, is a profound moral violation.
But let's circle all the way back to where we started. Kant's system is elegant, it's rational, and it's had a massive influence on our ideas about human rights and dignity. But it is not without its controversies.
This brings us back to the ultimate test case. We've established that lying fails the universal law test. It involves using another person as a mere means. So, according to a strict reading of Kant, you have a perfect duty not to lie. You should tell the truth.
And this is the core objection most people have: absolutism. Kant's rules seem to be totally black and white, with no room for nuance or context or consequences. And that just clashes deeply with our intuition that surely saving a life is more important than upholding some abstract rule against lying.
So what you should take away from all this is not that Kant has all the answers, but that he forces us to think about morality in a radically different way. He challenges us to move beyond just what feels right or what produces good results, and to seriously consider the universal principles that guide our actions and our respect for one another. And that leaves us with a final, provocative thought. Kant has made his case for the will. But, faced with that murderer at the door, where do you stand?